How to get the most dynamic range from your camera. Dynamic range is how well your camera can expose for both the brightest and darkest parts of the same image, and I'm gonna give you 3 tips to get the most dynamic range out of your camera as possible. Tip number 1, shoot in a log color profile. This will maximize your dynamic range by capturing as much detail in the highlights and shadows of your image. Then in color grading, you can bring the contrast and saturation back while still maintaining the high dynamic range. Tip number 2 is expose for the highlights. Typically, cameras do a great job of capturing detail in the shadows, but are not so good at capturing detail in the highlights. Once your highlights are too bright, the information is gone and there's nothing you can do to bring them back. This means you should expose for the brightest part of your image so you don't lose the information in the highlights. Tip 3, use your camera's native ISO. Your camera's dynamic range gets worse as you increase the ISO. To get the best dynamic range possible, shoot in your camera's native ISO. The native ISO is different for every camera, but for the Sony a7S III, it's 640, and for the Blackmagic, it's 400 and 3200.